Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome to a special episode of the FOF podcast. Me and Matt are currently driving back from our time at the Tank Museum last weekend. We were so thrilled to be invited down to experience the Fury experience. So
yeah, we're on the A34 if anyone's interested, and it was a great day.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So we'll just run you through our experiences, and then later in the show we'll cut to an interview with David Willey, the curator of the museum. So Matt, what did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect really. I've always quite liked the film. I know everyone has varied opinions on it, and that was something that was discussed during the actual, experience day itself.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really well shot, beautifully made film, and David Ayer clearly had, a penchant for kit.
Oh yeah.
In that film, and that's always something to be appreciated, I think. So I was interested to see what other people thought about it and what the speakers during the day said about it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really was. There was the way that it worked. There was a day of lectures, and then that was intercut with you being able to actually go up onto the Fury tank, have a little look inside.
Yeah.
With a man called Buzz who drove the tank for the film.
He was really nice.
He was a really nice guy, wasn't he? And you got to look inside, and there was some graffiti that was signed by like Brad Pitt and Michael Pena.
Yeah, well, he taught Michael Pena to drive the tank.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was just the behind the scenes thing that we really enjoyed. Learning about how Tiger 131 was used on set, and how the Tank Museum came to an agreement with the filmmakers.
Yeah.
We learned that there was a concrete track that was made underneath.
Yeah, so David Willey was explaining that they laid down a concrete bed on I think it was an old airbase or airport in Hertfordshire, I think.
Donington.
Was it? That's right. Well, yeah, that's right. And they laid down a bed and then put mud over it, just so that Tiger 131, the only running Tiger one, didn't sink into the mud and it become a massive debacle to get it out.
Yeah, because they were really concerned that when they got there in the morning of the day they wanted to shoot it, they put all this mud on top of the concrete track, and David and a couple of other Tank Museum staff were like, no, they can't run this seat because what if it gets bogged down. So they went away, and then the next day they came, it was like a thin layer of mud that was there. It was really quite interesting.
It was really interesting to hear David talk about what he didn't expect the film industry to be capable of, and then how they met all the requirements that the museum had set, for the use of this one-of-a-kind, unique vehicle.
Yeah, that's it.
Fury itself, not too uncommon. There's lots of running Shermans, thankfully, and they were fairly happy to put a Sherman into the film. But putting Tiger 131, the British Army's first captured Tiger, that's something else, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. They were also saying how the trustees of the museum were worried how perhaps the movie would portray certain aspects of the war. They were worried that because Tiger 131 almost certainly killed and shot at British troops, how the tank would be used, how it would be represented, how even the Nazi element of the war would be represented on film. So there were initially a bit of pushback from the Tank Museum, but once David had been sent a script, once they've been able to talk to David Ayer, and the production company actually went down to the museum to scout for potential vehicles, their mind was put at ease, I think. Yeah. And obviously they were saying how the PR for the museum was something they couldn't give up.
No, it's too good to let go, wasn't it?
Too good to let go.
Not only are they bringing money into the museum, which is a charity, museum's coffers, but it's also great PR, and getting the film with Brad Pitt attached to it, Shia LaBeouf, and the rest of the actors, which are all name actors.
Yeah, Michael Pena, John Bernthal, Luke Lerman,
Scott Eastwood's in there.
Scott Eastwood too.
Jason
Isaacs. Yeah.
So it's all known actors, and that's a great thing to be associated with. And they did that exhibition after the film was out, and they had a press conference there, and all that kind of stuff. So it was just too good to let pass, I think.
It was.
And I think the result, and David was really honest about what he thinks about the film. He likes the film, but like everyone else, he knows that there's inaccuracies in there and stuff that kind of grates.
Yeah, there was a fantastic lecture he did all about the accuracy at the end of the day.
Showing clips and stuff and explaining why they did that and why he thinks certain bits work really well, like the top hat element in there.
Yeah, that was really interesting, wasn't it?
Michael Pena has a top hat bit, and that comes from a life photograph from France in '44 of a Sherman crew. Yeah, just really loads of interesting little tidbits and behind the scenes stuff of what it was like to try and get these two 80-year-old tanks in the field running. I thought that was really interesting in and of itself, because they were saying by the end of the 2 weeks it was running really well, and they were confident that they could drive it across a muddy field and it wouldn't get bogged down.
Yes.
That's really interesting, because not only is it, it's in a film, they're learning about the vehicle, operating it.
Yeah, it was really interesting how, as well, they were keeping Tiger 131 in a marquee overnight. And to keep everything in running order, the film crew discovered that they could pump hot air into the gearbox, and it would keep it operational without having to run the engine.
I bet the Wehrmacht wish they'd known that.
Yeah, true. So David said that now they do that at the Tank Museum, and they learnt it afterwards, and they implemented it afterwards to help them preserve the engine a little bit better. Which is really interesting, and how they were spraying mud on the side and things like that. Just the movie magic, I think, helped them a little bit. Yeah.
And we got to see loads of behind-the-scenes photographs and videos from the filming of the sequence where Fury and the Tiger go up against each other. Lots of behind-the-scenes stuff. So you get to see a guy flicking fake mud onto 131's wheels and stuff.
It's like peelable. Peel it off. That's another thing that the museum were worried about was, is the tank going to be changed to be something after that it's not?
Yeah, is it going to get damaged? Is it? Yeah.
But obviously through the movie magic, nothing was changed. When you see the tank, when you see Tiger 131 in the rushes that they were showing with no special effects, it literally is just Tiger 131 driving forward. There's nothing else that's happening there. There's no charges going off on the tank. There's the gun's not being operated. The only thing they said they did was they used an AK-47 blank firer in the bow gun of the MG42, I think.
Yeah, they did say that. Yeah.
And then they fired that, but then obviously in post they put all the effects on.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. But we didn't get to see Tiger 131 on the day. I think she was being worked on in one of the warehouses.
One of the workshops.
Workshops, yeah.
But we did get to look inside Fury, and that was cool.
We did. It was amazing. One thing I think I mentioned it on my Twitter. One thing I don't appreciate, and you can't really appreciate from newsreel footage and pictures, is just how big these things are.
Yeah.
They're absolute behemoths. I'm not the tallest man in the world. People know this, but going up to Fury and being able to stand so close,
well, we got to stand on the engine deck and look down into the turret. Couldn't get in, but you still get a really great appreciation for what the inside of a turret on a tank looks like. And it struck me that once that turret's traversed, you don't really have any direct contact with the guys in the bow.
Crew, no, you don't. So I'm up on the Fury tank.
Oh, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, what you're looking at, none of the actual film was actually filmed inside.
Right, cool.
None of it. They just sat in here looking pretty, for the exterior shots.
Yeah, wow.
It's very incomplete inside, but that doesn't matter to us because we just use it just for our general events.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a few bits of the kit missing.
When was this one actually made then?
Just towards the end of the war, 1945, I think.
Okay.
So it didn't actually serve in the war.
Yeah.
I think it's the Canadian Army owned it.
Okay.
And then it was donated to us or something. So we've just been using it as our just run around.
Wow. So when did it see it saw action?
They did see action
Didn't
in
see
the war.
action.
No.
Oh, okay.
I
Didn't
think
go.
it was on standby.
Right. So it didn't go to Korea or anything like that. Oh,
Not as far as we know, no.
Okay. So obviously all the set dressing, things like that, all of them, the stowage, is that from the movie itself?
Yeah, that's all film prop. All these bags,
Brilliant.
all these bags and that. We've had it out of the rain. They started to wither a bit, fall apart.
Yeah, I guess so. They don't last forever, do they? I mean,
Of course, some did deteriorate, so that's got a little bit smaller.
Yeah. How were you involved in the movie?
I just asked me, do you want to appear on film? I thought it was just going to be like a little documentary thing.
Yeah, wow.
But when they said Brad Pitt, because I didn't know who he was at that time. So,
You mentioned earlier, Michael Payne learnt to drive the...
yeah, we taught him how to drive it. No problem
No
whatsoever.
problem. Brilliant. Matt, do you want to get up in?
You ever worked on a film before?
Oh, nah. We've done a couple of little documentaries.
I bet there's lots come through.
I don't know.
Documentaries, that
We
is.
did supply a tank for the first Wonder Woman film,
Alright.
but it was never used.
Oh, shame.
So it was just stuck in the parking lot thing. So originally this would have all been like a ivory white, this sort of colour.
Right, yeah.
But when it gets into British hands, they either paint it grey or silver. All their tanks are all painted like that. But the Americans had a like ivory white,
Yeah.
obviously reflected. Well, that's why it looks a bit like that.
I see, that's really interesting.
Hello, Robbie here. Did you know you can support the podcast on Patreon? Join the supporting cast today and gain access to exclusive perks, such as discount codes, our monthly Patreon film votes, and the chance to get exclusive merchandise before anyone else. Search Fighting on Film on Patreon or find the link on our website. Thank you. Now back to the show. There was a fantastic lecture actually as well in the afternoon about the history of the Sherman. A great through line of, was the Sherman tank the best tank of the war, or was it good enough?
Yeah.
And some really interesting theories put up there, and just how many Sherman variants were used during the war as well. Yeah, it's really interesting.
And how can we, 80 years later, assess it as a weapon, as a technological implement, as something that people fought and died in? It's one of my colleagues has described it as much maligned, the Sherman, over the past few decades. Fairly, unfairly, you probably already have your own opinions about that.
I think the tank itself is interesting in its own right, and I think the movie Fury has helped its longevity in a way.
Yes, I think so. The one thing I took away from that talk was just how many variants. I knew there was lots of variants,
Yes.
but I didn't know there were variants of variants.
No, of course, yeah. And then there were field-made differences as well.
Yeah.
Kind of how like the Firefly was developed because they needed it, not because they wanted it. Really interesting.
The UK putting more ammo in the position of the assistant gunner instead of having the guy in the bow, and, four-man rather than a five-man crew. That kind of stuff is really interesting.
It is.
And one thing I would say about all of the talks is there was more than enough in there for if you were like a Fury or a tank aficionado, or if you just enjoyed the film and you wanted to go along and see the tank. I thought it was really well weighted, so that there was stuff in there that even if you knew a lot of stuff already, you would learn something.
Yeah, you would.
And then on top of that, you get the whole bit about the making of the film and how all that came together.
There's something for everyone, isn't there?
Things in this film that I would argue are very authentic, well done, well thought through, well structured, and for a film buff who likes war movies, at last. I mean, let's start at the beginning. You've got a Tiger tank, a real one in a war movie. Do you know the last time that happened? About 1946.
And then there was time during the day to go look around the museum as well.
There was a guided tour.
Yes,
to go and look at all of the various marks of Sherman that the museum has.
Yeah, they gave you a map and it told you where to go. And
because they have everything from the second one ever produced, Michael, through to the
latest variant,
the Fireflies, and
the
76mm variants.
It was great, and they also gave out a special booklet about all the Sherman variants they have at the museum.
Yeah.
And that was a really nice little touch there. And then after lunch, we were able to talk to David Willey. So here's us interviewing him now. We're here at the Tank Museum at their Fury Experience, and we're really pleased to be joined by David Willey, who's the curator of the museum. And David, we've got some questions for you. So first off, when did the museum get involved in the filming?
I think it was early in 2013 we started getting a couple of emails asking about access to certain vehicles. What did we have? We also had some approaches by something I've learned about now, which is a lot of people try and do what you might call finder's fees.
Yep.
So the idea of you're coming forward thinking I want to be the middleman that's collecting these or sorting things out, etc. So once we got to the bottom of what it was, we ended up with the first one guy that I went out and had a chat with was a location manager who basically explained what was coming, and that led to us getting a number of different approaches from the art department, etc. What have we got in terms of imagery? What can we supply? The vehicle side was the obvious one they were very keen on having a look at, and that led to a visit from the then what was going to be the director, David Ayer. A number of the production staff came down and they had a look at the vehicles we were potentially able to offer and follow up on a little bit of a negotiation, because the idea we had a Tiger, it did run, would there be any chance that might be available to us, etc. And you can imagine that was quite an interesting set of negotiations, because we weren't, first of all, thinking there was any chance we'd let the Tiger off site.
Yeah, of course.
Restored it with lottery money. It was for public benefit, etc. How would this work? Would it go down okay with our trustees? Ethics, can we have a look at the script? So they sent us a film script. Are we sure this is a film we want to get engaged in? If it had been, weren't the Nazis good type stuff, not that there's many films made that way, but, those are the sorts of things that just wouldn't be right for us to get engaged in. But anyway, it led to the fact that we did discuss, we came up with lots of different issues, clauses, safety nets around if we were to lend not just the Sherman, which we were much more happy about because we regularly ran it, but the Tiger as well. And that led to us coming to that conclusion. Yes, we wanted to do it, we wanted to make a bit of money.
Yeah.
We wanted to, our real aim as well, could we get an exhibition out of it for public, to come and see afterwards. That was written into the deal we did. And another part of it was we thought we were doing it to make the museum more famous. In other words, if that could get our story out there, that would be us doing our job in the right way.
Yeah.
Had you ever worked on films in the museum before, or was this the very first one?
The Tank Museum has actually got quite a long history of being engaged and involved in filmmaking, other than just documentaries. Obviously, documentaries all the time. There's a crew here, it seems like once a week sometimes, picking up things, or nowadays blogs, internet, etc., all the different YouTubes, all these different ways that people are trying to tell the story. But if you go back, the Yag Panther from here was involved in, it happened here. Of course. There's our Half Track was involved in, it was a wartime British film and I was going to remember it, but it's set in the desert. Our Half Track was in that. If you actually went before some of the tanks even came to the Tank Museum, they are used on Chobham Common, and you can see it on the Arnhem film.
Theirs is the Glory.
Theirs is a Glory, so there's our tanks.
The very first film we covered.
Yeah, so you've got that one, you've got some other ones as well. So it would be foolish for me to say no, we hadn't been, but certainly since 2000, this is the first blockbuster. They were involved in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, wow.
So we got some of the props from that, because and the £6 gun you see on that mock-up tank is actually
You have one of the pennants, don't you?
We do over in the
showed
store.
me last time I was here.
So we've got. So there is a tradition of the museum where we could be involved in certain areas that way, but certainly from my point of view, I came here in 2000, and lots and lots of documentary stuff, and I purposely, I remember actually saying, wouldn't it be great to get to see a proper big war movie?
Yeah.
Because the fascination with seeing how it's done, all the bits behind the scenes, and still, and I'd like to think it's still true, you still get that idea that a big Hollywood movie is going to have an impact, whether that's gone now with Netflix and all the different ways things are actually streamed, etc. But still back then, And I remember jokingly, before we even knew it was Brad Pitt was in there, I remember saying that at some point, wouldn't it be good if it's some big star Brad Pitt type woman? Yeah. And sure enough, actually they said, yeah, it's Brad Pitt, we've got Brad Pitt signed up. And I said it in the office, and I remember at the time, even them slightly taken aback, because some of the younger girls didn't know Brad Pitt.
Wow.
Because he's old hat when you think about it, because he's my age. So they did know some of the younger stars, they knew their names, but they didn't necessarily go for, whereas there was other young ladies working here who were, yes, very much taken with the idea that Brad Pitt was going to come to the Tank Museum.
Amazing. So, apart from the Tiger tank, what else did the museum loan to the film production?
Well, obviously, the Fury tank is our main Sherman, so we had that as an issue. One of the debates that was going on early on was, should all the tanks be of the same model? What's the chance of you being able to do that, even in this day and age when many more Shermans are running perhaps than before? So we had a very sort of lengthy conversation. We were finding the evidence, because one of the other things is we're all going to be experts, aren't we, in terms of criticising what's on the film. But this idea that 76-gun Shermans were still being used with 75-gun Shermans mixed in units, plenty of evidence for that. Some of the issues about crews turning up who didn't actually know what they were doing. There's battles where the Americans were actually sending Shermans forward with only 4 men in there because they were running out of trained crews. So it's another one of those. When we were looking at the different sorts of things that we could offer up in terms of help, not just the equipment, it was trying to be able to give. Not that they'd written the script, we went through the script, etc. We weren't going to change any of that. But when you're looking at the confidence to be able to say, would this type of thing have happened? Where we could say, well, actually, there is evidence for this, even if there's not evidence for, let's be honest, there's bits in the film that sometimes stretch the envelope or the parameters a little bit. But that idea of, would you have seen Shermans like that? Well, yeah, actually you would. There's photographic evidence the way they were put together that way. Would you have had a seasoned crew that know what they're doing? Yeah, you do, because the Americans are creaming German Panthers in the rain, because their crews are very well trained, very well seasoned, and the Panther crews aren't. So, if you're doing your top trumps, the Panthers should have won, but no, actually the Shermans won. So the evidential bit on some of this is we were engaged that way. We're also looking at, we knew a man who could. So sometimes when they were asking us, where might we go for the following, that's something else that other filmmakers have come to us before, because sometimes we can put on, or if they're asking for things that just simply don't exist, we're quite confident we can say, forget that, you're going to have to build a replica, or yes, you'll get one of those, or by the way, he's the only guy, so be nice to him, if you're going to try and go down that route.
Sure. So how involved were you as your capacity as curator of the museum? How involved were you?
I'm not a curator, I'm a curator. But
sorry.
I'm always I love that when people say, well, you're the curator of the Tank Museum, and I have to politely explain to them that I'm not. But no, I'm
upbringing.
Yeah, it's the for us as an organisation, one of the things it's basically being a negotiation point as well. So when the filmmakers are saying, what's the chance of this, going away and having, right, what can we do, lads, whether it's being in charge of the workshop, so it's actually, can we supply a crew, what have we got in the archive, what can we supply to, so for example, the cast came down and we did a little presentation, and in fact you'll see this afternoon, there's one of the slides I actually showed them, and it's how it makes them feel confident, because they do a lot of bonding, they do all their stuff, but is this really what a tank crew might be like? Because if you like your films, where you see some films where body language is just not right for that period, and when does that make a difference, and when do you alienate your audience? So you understand Hollywood is always compromises, because it's a Hollywood film, it is not a documentary. But wouldn't it be nice that we can make suggestions? And there's things that come out in the film that you can see the actors have picked up on from, I'm not going to say it's a tank museum here, but there was a lot of British soldiers on the set who were, or ex-British soldiers who'd been serving, they'd served in Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. And that shot, for example, where you see the gunner's nervous foot shaking as he's waiting. Yeah. Absolutely, that came from one of the British tank crewmen saying, that's exactly when he was firing. It's firing now, and that nervous tension before you're given the order to actually send the round down at the target. So all of these types of little details that were coming across, where one hopes at certain moments gives it.
Yeah, it does.
It's not a perfect film, but it gives it a little bit more authenticity. Absolutely. Here and there.
I mean, that's one of the little things that I pointed out last night when I rewatched the film. I noticed the foot, and I thought that's showing tension. It's right there.
Absolutely that. And the guys that have done it and everything. There's a lot of them on the set. There's also the opposite as well, which was David Ray, who plays the German commander, was a tank commander, and he was instructor down here in Bovington, served all over the place. And again, he said to us that the minute that he realised that the director was basically saying, move the tiger up the field, he looked, his jaw dropped open, and as if he looked around as if to say, why on earth would I do that? Because I would sit here and pick off those targets as they come over the horizon, keep my thick armour forward.
Yeah.
The last thing I do is move from this position in those circumstances. And because of the story, that's exactly what does happen, and the vulnerability of the tank is exposed by that, because if let's just say the Shermans are more manoeuvrable on that particular battlefield, you're going to reveal weaknesses of your tank. And of course, him being a trained, very experienced tank commander, he just looked as if to go, this is not what I would do as a tank commander. But that's not what the story does say, so there you go.
Of course. And finally, what's your favourite non-tank war movie?
I was just thinking about this one, because I was saying earlier, I have to say the film that I still would recommend to people, if you've not seen war films or anything else before, and it still blows your socks off, I think come and see the Russian film set in World War II is just, for me, one of those amazing spectacles. And at the end of it, I don't know, I just still think you know, that awful line, this film will change your life, but sometimes, so...
It's such an affecting film.
It is, in so many ways, and there's moments of, I can only describe it as absolute horror in it. For example, when the kids run through and if you see it, I won't ruin it for people, but there's things in that I just think are staggering, and I have to say, at a moment like this, with all that's going on in the world, saying you love Russian things, but Russian film at certain times has done some amazing. The Cranes Are Flying is another one of these films that won various awards, Venice Biennale and Film Festival, rather. But there's, if you get to watch those Russian war films, and Come and See is a great example, because it starts making you realise what Russia went through in World War II. And I'm not
different experience.
Exactly. So, and I'm not going to be apologist for the current Russian government in any way whatsoever, but that idea of, yes, Britain went through it, yes, America went through it, but Russia really went through it. And that scale, which comes across at the end when they're talking about that in Come and See, I'd really recommend that. I'm also think we live through a golden age now, because in the old days, I was talking earlier about where myself and someone who works here, actually, we used to go to the same couple of video shops in Soho that would import other countries' DVDs and VHSs, and if you were trying to look at military movies, now we have such a great plethora of sources we can go to, whether it's online, whether it's Amazon, whether it's whatever. And so some of these things that could have taken a trip to BFI, or I can remember early on going to the Imperial War Museum to actually watch a print of the Arnhem film, and now you can buy it on the DVD. I've got my copy, I've got two copies, one from a charity shop, for 50p. So that sense of us being able to find out and see more, I think that's a great one. I would say the downside, I would say I love film, but actually, let's be honest, I haven't been to the cinema for ages. So seeing the experience as it was intended, there's me watching on an iPlayer or a DVD or whatever at home with the dog on your lap. It's not quite the same as when back to when
Fury, for instance, if you haven't seen that
on a big screen, I don't know, with a proper sound, the noise in your chest.
Cinematography is
amazing. And I think that's something we've all got to, please, let's not stop going to the cinema, because those moments, and I'm of a generation, I remember A Bridge Too Far and the way, the music at the beginning, it set a scene for me. I absolutely besotted by the film at the time. I was first battlefield, cycled off to Arnhem. I wrote to Frost, to Urquhart, to Horrocks, and they all replied. And they're still going, I've got those letters still. But that idea of how certain things can put the hooks in you. And at the same time, I can remember about not dissimilar period, I think it was a year or so later, out came Apocalypse Now. I walked in the cinema, the lights had already gone down, I was just a bit light. I remember just hearing over the back of my shoulder that classic whoop, 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 whoop noise. And suddenly the whole screen just lit up as that napalm burst. And I remember just being absolutely blown away by almost the physical experience of being in the cinema and seeing this thing in that manner, which however many times we're going to watch it and pull it apart on our DVD or our iPlayer or whatever, and all the making of one, it's not the same as sitting in a cinema, is it? And watching that fantastic spectacle.
Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us, David.
Okay, no problem.
So that was great. I mean, talking to David was
Such a nice guy, though.
yeah, he's really chatty. There's a lot more that didn't make that interview just for time purposes, but he's really such a nice chap.
Super knowledgeable, super nice. I mean, that's the second time I've spoken to him. I met him last year.
Yeah, I mean, filming.
He's so knowledgeable. As you can hear there, he's not only a curator and a historian, but he's also a bit of a film buff.
Yeah, he is.
So
really is.
that really adds to the
the
experience day that the museum's putting on.
Yeah, really is. So finally, Matt, and people saw on our Twitter and on our own socials that we got to go into the Vehicle Research Centre. Conservation Centre, sorry. We could be here all day talking about the ins and outs of that place. It was staggering.
That was amazing.
It was amazing. But what was your one vehicle that you saw that you weren't expecting to see?
There were a few really cool things in there. There was like an FV432 prototype.
Yeah.
And then there was a really cool. I can't remember what the vehicle was called. But there was an armoured car with Malcara missiles on there.
Yeah.
And that was really cool to see.
The picture of Matt next to that rocket is being excited. is that's the one he chose. But for me, I mean, I was staggered. I was absolutely floored. Just went round the corner I was looking at some armoured cars then. I just went round the corner and there was a Cambridge carrier and an Oxford carrier next to each other.
I know, an Oxford.
And I couldn't believe it. I didn't think any existed. I knew that the Tank Museum had one, but I wasn't expecting to see it. And it was just incredible. And if you ever anyone listening gets the chance to go into that conservation centre, it's
amazing.
Oh, it's amazing.
Well, when David took us up there, he was like, "Well, we'll go upstairs and you can see from the balcony."
Yeah.
And he said, "I always liken this to the scene from Indiana Jones."
Yes, it
with
felt
the
like
warehouse.
that, didn't it? It felt like
it's
that.
It's like, it's just the expanse and all of those holes and those tanks is so cool.
It was amazing. I want to thank the Tank Museum for letting us go down. It was incredible. They're running the event again in October. We'll keep you up to date on that one. Hope we're going to try and do some Fury themed shows around that time. We've got some guests on the back burner that we're going to try and get on for that.
Absolutely. Hopefully David will come on for an episode as well.
Yeah, we'll try and do that too.
Open invite for him. But yeah. Best experience day you ever had?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you say?
It was, yeah. It was really great, yeah. And thanks, and as always, keep up to date on the socials. Support us on Patreon if you can. Stay tuned for next week when we will be reviewing another war film, and that will be the Patreon pick.
Yes, it will. Can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. So thanks a lot, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.